All right. It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Sara Clemens is the current COO of Twitch, and one of Silicon Valley's few female senior executives. She's also a proud Kiwi, born and raised here in New Zealand, and credits New Zealand with providing her the skills and the opportunities that she needed early on in her career to become a strategic operator on the world stage. A self-described problem solver, Sara started her career by working in mobile telecom in London. She then moved to Seattle, where she spent 5 years at Microsoft and worked on the expansion and business operations of Xbox division, and she was a founding member of the team that created the HoloLens. Before joining Twitch, Sara was on the executive leadership team of several groups, including LinkedIn and Pandora, where her efforts to build relationships with the music industry landed her on Billboard's list of the most powerful women in music in 2015 and 2016. Since then, she's used her corporate strategy and international experience at Amazon-owned Twitch, where she focused on building the systems and the infrastructure necessary to connect content creators with their audiences. An advocate of experiential learning, she's also in an advisory role on the board of Hootsuite and Duolingo, and she enjoys having an eye on how other industries are operating. She's a passion for the connection between digital media and technology and has taken an active role in promoting women in business. She's with us today remotely, and she will be hosted by Lorian Gugic, a Twitch streamer and community manager from Rocketworks. Please join me in welcoming Sara Clemens and Lorian to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Just checking this is working. Okay. Hello, Sara. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. Just before we get started, are we able to get Sara on the TV down here, please? Thank you. Alrighty. Did you hear the introduction that you were just given?
I did. I'm watching you all from the back of the room. The team kindly set me up a camera, so if you all turn to your right and look backwards, I can wave you.
There's a little camera there with a little light on it. Hi, Sara. Hi. No, it's cool. It's really wonderful to have you here. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the questions anyhow. But yes, hi everyone. My name is Laurie. I am a 6-year partner Twitch streamer, which feels like a really long time ago. And I broke off into game development because I play games on the hardest difficulty, and my brain just started going that way. And here I am moderating a keynote with Sara Clemens, the woman herself. It's really good to have you here, especially for New Zealand's game development. We're such a small, tight-knit group, and it's really wonderful to have you spend your time here and join with us. Alrighty. All right, so we mentioned that you completed a Master of Arts at the University of Canterbury. So I have a few questions there. What was your favourite project or piece that you worked on?
Yeah, so I'm going to say dabbled in my undergraduate, which is a polite way of saying I just sort of messed around until I got an undergraduate degree and then decided what I needed to do was get something that may actually result in me getting a job. And that thing was my master's, which I'd sort of stumbled into media policy and found it really fascinating. And at the time, and I'm going to age myself horribly here, this was pre-internet for all of you in the room who were born after the internet arrived. But at the time, I wrote a master's thesis on how you establish content standards in deregulated broadcasting markets, which has been 2.5 years of my life that I have extracted ridiculous amounts of value from in the last 6 years when I spent a lot of time thinking about content moderation and building trust and safety systems. And so, it's one of those very weird deja vu things where you do something in what feels like a past life and it comes back to be incredibly useful. And it sort of feels like I've come full circle in some respects. So that was definitely my favorite thing there.
Oh, great. No, that's really wonderful to know. It's so humbling to hear you. I think many people in here might have even attended the University of Canterbury, so it's really great that you started there. Right, so going off of that to your work at Microsoft and Xbox, was that your first game industry job, and how did you bring the HoloLens to the market?
Yeah, so games was a big part of most of the roles that I had from 2000 onwards. So you mentioned that I was in sort of mobile internet roles in London in 2000. A lot of the work in mobile and content at the time was about how you actually brought like rich media services to the phone. And again, this was like very rudimentary days in hindsight. You know, we were working with WAP or wireless access protocol, which was just incredibly clunky. But I worked at Three, which is a global mobile business, and we were building all of these live streaming services. And we worked with a bunch of mobile games developers to try and build out mobile games into the Three store. So that was really fun. It was sort of the first time I think I'd worked on how do you adapt media to the platform that you're building, because a lot of the approaches that have been taken to games to date hadn't really worked. And then in terms of, you know, jumping forward a decade from there to working at Xbox, when I joined Xbox, the Kinect had just launched. And the person who had designed the Kinect, Alex Kipman, he was the sort of founding technology leader for that. He was in his what do I do post-Kinect phase. And he took me into a studio lab one day. And I don't know how many of you have been to the optometrist, but you go in and they do all the sort of adjustment of the lenses to work out, you know, what your eyesight should look like. And he did this for me on a screen, and then he said, just look straight ahead. And he flicked a switch, and a dancing lobster showed up. And it was the first time, you know, I'd seen augmented reality, and it was just mind-blowing. Like there's a crew of us who still talk about the lobster because it was sort of one of those like mind-bending moments in our lives, frankly. And so Alex and I worked together, you know, for a number of years. We like built all the strategy and funding proposal. It's a pretty material capital investment, building out something the nature of HoloLens. And then we spent a lot of time just buying the tech, doing service development. You know, we had a lot of fun building early games, which were crazy. We had to wear literally like a server in a backpack with like a big helmet with all of the technology HoloLens in it. So it looked a little bit like you were a character out of Halo, but it was just all this like really rudimentary tech that we were using at the time. But it was pretty good fun being involved that early in something.
Do you have any specific memory that you can go back to that is very like fun or entertaining aside from the lobster?
So the other moment I loved, like, it's a necessarily nerdy group of people who get involved in building something like HoloLens. And we, at one point when we finally got like an actual game up and running, it was a game where you had to go into a room that was all white walls. And the game had been designed so that you had what was like a shooter, and this was all with the backpacks and the helmets, and you would shoot and you could hear the monsters running through the walls. And then you had to shoot them, but as soon as you shot a hole, the monsters would come out. And so it was this sort of strategy game where you had to work out how do you kill the monsters without letting too many out of too many holes at the same time. My lawyer, the lawyer who was working with me on it was a woman, and we ended up like reigning kings of this game because we worked strategically together. The guys were just like shot around in circles and blew the walls out. There were monsters everywhere. But it was hilarious. Like we used to spend hours doing it. It was such good fun.
Oh, that's really neat that you can reflect on that, your job there, and have those sort of memories. It's very, very cool. All right, so we're going to move on to, which I find is really interesting. You helped connect LinkedIn to China. How did you segue from Microsoft and work at Xbox to LinkedIn, and how did you get that up and running?
Yeah, so LinkedIn was a slightly strange move in hindsight. So I'd always operated at the intersection of digital media and tech. So like, what's the next platform and how are you going to use it to distribute media, connect content creators and fans, basically. And LinkedIn, when I was joining, were very interested in how they build a publishing platform. And so I was hired in to work on that specifically. But when I joined, the CEO, Jeff Weiner, realized I had done a lot of work on China and was like, oh, I've always wanted to go to China, let's do that. And you know, I'd exited Xbox from China in 2010. And then I'd run a venture fund in China for 2 years while I was at Microsoft. It's a super difficult market to launch as a Western internet company. There's a lot of regulatory overhead, a lot of licenses you have to get, a lot of loops you have to jump through. And so, you know, our approach was, we need to go in there, you have to go in with a JV partner, so you need to spend a lot of time in China finding someone you can partner with who you trust. But we very much felt like there was a number of people in China who would want to connect to the rest of the globe on LinkedIn. And of the, I think it was like 800 million working people in China, about 200 million of them were professionals who had global roles. And so we felt like if we could tap into that, we could build a really good network effect. And so I ended up doing that. I actually only stayed at LinkedIn for about 18 months because I realized working at a professional network was not really the thing that got me out of bed every day. But both the publishing work and the China work were really fun.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. How many years did you spend at doing that with LinkedIn in China?
I was only there for like 18 months.
Wow.
I jumped out pretty quick. Yeah, I jumped
You
out
put
pretty
yourself
quick.
to
I literally
work.
arrived. Yeah, no, I arrived. China was like the whole ball game. And because I'd done it before, we sort of were able to jump a bunch of steps. The very first board paper I put together on China, I had a slide that said, here are all the Western internet companies that have been successful in China. And then I had like the classic sort of slide of like Amazon and Google and Facebook and everybody else. And then the next slide was the ones that have been successful and there was nothing on it. And I was like, it's a really low bar here in terms of whether we can be successful or not. So it was fun.
Alrighty, you moved on to the music industry. You kind of like hopping along all these industries, it's wonderful. So Pandora Radio, Most Powerful Women in Music 2015 and 2016, congratulations, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
How was that time there and how did you specifically contribute to the music industry back then?
Yeah, so the Pandora move was definitely more of a passion move. Music games are much more my thing. And Pandora at the time was operating in the US, Australia and New Zealand, and it had been very constrained in its ability to kind of build out new services because it relied on statutory licenses, so the same way that radio stations work. But it really limited like the feature sets they could build. And because they relied on those licenses, they paid these sort of government agencies who then shared out all the money that Pandora paid to musicians out to the labels and the creators. And so it meant they were completely dark to the music industry. They had no relationship with the music industry at all. And I remember I signed up my contract in November 2013. And in December 2013, Billboard, which is like the preeminent music magazine globally, the cover of it was World War P. They literally compared Pandora to the zombie apocalypse. And so I was like, okay, again, low bar. Really, if you can just be on the zombie apocalypse, we'll be doing a good job. And so we went in and we spent a lot of time doing sort of listening tours with the labels and with artists and just really understanding like what they wanted from Pandora. And we ended up building out what we called the artist marketing platform. And it was really helping the music industry understand what was happening with their music on Pandora, and then giving them tools to promote artists on Pandora. So we gave them data about where their songs would be playing, what cities those were popular in. They could use it for designing tours. And then we built tools, and one of the most successful ones was audio messages. So an artist could record a little audio clip, basically just a message. They did it on their mobile phone, so it wasn't tough. And then they would just press a button and we would play it automatically on either side of their song playing in Pandora. And so suddenly these had calls to action attached to them. So it could be like, buy my latest album, buy a ticket to my concert, add me as a station, which means they would get more spins. And I just checked the numbers this morning, actually. 12 billion audio messages have been delivered in the last 5 years since we launched that product. Yeah, and so it's been really successful in terms of helping artists just, drive awareness and get more fans. And I left in 2014, right at the beginning of the year. 2017, right at the beginning of the year. And that month, the cover of Billboard was our founder, Tim Westengren, and Questlove from The Roots on the cover, celebrating the shift in Pandora's relationship with the music industry. So it was one of those things where you got a really nice bookend to either side of it. It was like
Absolutely.
Zombie apocalypse. What you're doing. Yeah, it was nice. It was very rewarding.
That's great. And how do you think they're faring since you've left?
So I have to say one of the saddest things that ever happened was I left, and then about 6 months later they shut down Australia and New Zealand. And my father to this day has not forgiven me. He's always like, when's Pandora coming back to New Zealand? I'm like, I don't work there anymore. I have no influence over this at all. I bought him a Spotify subscription. He's like, no, I don't like it. I like the way they just played me music I loved. And I'm like, I'm in the dog box for life over this. But it's one of those things where you're like, okay. So they ended up getting acquired by Sirius XM, and so they've doubled down on a US only strategy. I think the business is doing reasonably well, but yeah, I was always a bit sad they didn't stay independent.
You're a force to be reckoned with, I think. All right, so that was your last job, I believe, until you started at Twitch, correct? So we won't get into the Twitch questions right now. I would like to get to know actually get to know you more personally, get to know some of your influences, the sort of environment you grew up in, your mindset, and some people who inspired you when you were going maybe from a small child or a teenager up until you working at Twitch. So of course everyone wants to know, what was your first video game that you played that you remember?
I know this very clearly because I remember sitting at primary school, Henry Hall Primary School in Onikawa in Napier. It was the Casio NG880 calculator game.
Wow.
Like we used to play. You got to remember, like Napier in the 1970s and early 80s was not like the heart of the technology landscape. And so nobody I knew had a console or a gaming PC, so we were either playing at arcades or we were playing things like calculator games.
Thanks for sharing that with us. All right, so in regards to your marketing and artistic vision, which key moments across your career have really stood out to you as life-changing or pinnacle moments that you've experienced in that regard?
Yeah, it's funny. You have these moments where you're like, oh, I did that thing, and that like really changed things. And I've been really lucky just by virtue of having been in the right job at the right place to do that. So the role I had in London in 2001, where we were building out the game store on the 3G network. We were the first 3G network in the world to do that. In hindsight, it was ridiculously audacious. So we had these like clamshell mobile phones. They had live streaming on them. They were the first ones to have live streaming because it was 3G only. And we were buying video rights and doing video streaming for sports. We were building the game store. We were trying to build a mapping service. But back in those days, there was no mapping data, so we had to license it all from NASA. Like, it was just sort of insane. But building the game store at the time, I remember working with games devs, and we were trying to teach them, like, this is what the capability of these phones will do. And we don't just want sort of what I refer to as trinket games, like, sort of more of the, like, small, lightweight games. We wanted things that really showcased the device, and we're like, this will have live video on it, and this will be kind of interactive. And it was really fun, like working with games through that period, just working with them and them seeing the potential of what games were going to be on mobile in the future.
All right, thank you. Next question I have was, were you surrounded by or enjoyed communities, whether it's communities near your house or online communities? Do you have any that really stood out to you and resonated with you and sort of projected you into a particular job or anything like that?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is the Kiwi diaspora. Like I've worked offshore now for 2 decades. Both in Europe and the United States, but I spent a ton of time in other countries working. I spent a couple of years in Beijing, 6 months in Moscow, a year in Tel Aviv, just in the nature of the roles I've had, they've involved traveling to a lot of places. And anywhere you go, there are Kiwis, and every Kiwi treats you like you've known them since you were born. So it's literally like, you're me, oh, you're a Kiwi, let's have a beer. And it is one of the nicest things about being from New Zealand is the sense that when you stumble into each other in random parts of the world, that you'll always have somebody to go out for a beer with. So that's certainly the first one. I think that there's 2 others that really resonate with me, and they're both related to jobs. The first was Xbox and the second is Twitch. Mm-hmm. Both of those places were just like families. There were people who were just insanely passionate about what they did. There were big communities around the service. So we had, like the live community and all of the gaming communities. Twitch just is a massive global community. It's like this family of, this weird kind of disjointed set of families that come together and all understand what each other do. And I love being part of that. Twitch is the best role I've ever had, in large part because of that.
Oh, that's really, really good. All right, last one in this section. Who was your mentor or inspiration up until you landed at Twitch?
Yeah, so inspiration hands down were my parents. They grew up in New Zealand. Dad grew up in Petone, Mum grew up in Christchurch. They both left school when they were 15. They came from really big families, and they just had this sort of work ethic. Their motto in life was work hard, treat people well. That was it. And honestly, it's a pretty good sort of life basis. It's like, okay, work hard, treat people well, it'll get you a long way. And so, to this day, that's certainly for me, where a lot of my motivation comes from. In terms of mentors, I've been really lucky. I've worked with a bunch of phenomenal women. And I do think, being a woman in tech can be a pretty lonely space. And so there's real merit in seeking out other women who are doing it as well. And I had a bunch of my managers when I was early in my career were women. A lot of my colleagues and friends now are women across the industry, and they really provide a support network to me. And we kind of co-mentor each other and provide each other advice and support, which I think is fabulous.
That's very wholesome. Thank you for sharing. All right, so now we're going to get into Twitch. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about your role as COO, the reason why we're here today, which is brilliant, and we will be asking some game dev questions later on as well. All right, so what realms of responsibility does the COO of Twitch undertake? How can you give us a sort of umbrella vision of what you do?
Yeah, so COOs are different in every company, and my generic description is they are the person who does whatever nobody else is doing at that point in time. And so when I joined 4 years ago, the thing nobody else was really doing was running all of our go-to-market and corporate functions. So Emmett Shear is our CEO. He's a genius product and engineering leader, and he literally hired me and was like, I need help with this other stuff. So I run all of our community teams, our games dev teams, partners, advertisers, customer experience, trust and safety. We have teams in 30 different countries that roll under me. So anything that's not like we build the product sits in my scope.
Right. How do you feel about bringing your past experiences and responsibilities into your current role, and how have they complemented what you do at Twitch?
Yeah, so all of my roles have had a distinguishing factor, which is they've been about building a new thing at scale really quickly. So, they're hypergrowth companies, or they have a brand new initiative that they want, and it's like, okay, we want it done in a way that's scalable, and we want it done fast. And Twitch is very much in that space. It's a hypergrowth business. We grew 100% year on year in 2021. And so a lot of the questions were around, how do you handle growth? How do you build up teams around the globe? How do you set up core systems like trust and safety, and have marketing and customer support and promotion? And some of it's the front end stuff that, is shiny and fun, the marketing and the Twitch cons. And then a lot of it is sort of grubby back end stuff. It's like, how do you pay millions of creators in hundreds of countries and, however many different currencies in 15 days after they've earned the money? And so a lot of that stuff is what I describe as the stuff that people only notice when it breaks.
Right. So the past 10 years of Twitch has been massive. I've been around for 6 years of that, so I've seen a lot of changes myself. But how do you feel about, where Twitch started at Justin TV and where it is now, and where do you see Twitch going in the future?
Yeah, so Twitch was the OG of the creator economy. If you think back to Justin TV days, they were referred to as Web 2.0 because it literally introduced live streaming to the internet. And when you fast forward to 21, Twitch creators now produce more content every single day that is available in Netflix's entire global catalog. Wow. And so you just think about the amount of video that we're producing and streaming around the world. So we've had 67 billion hours of viewership since 2011, which is enough. This is one of my fun facts, enough for the entire human race to watch over 8 hours of video per person. And we're just continuing to see that growth exponentially. 2020, we had 86 times more the viewership of 21, and every month so far in 21 has surpassed 2020. So we're definitely at a stage where we feel like we have really good velocity on the business. We've focused now on adding new languages, supporting more global communities, building more partnerships, adding more content verticals. So you've seen expansion into music and sports and talk shows. And the potential of Twitch for me has and always will be that anybody can come and find a community that they feel part of, that's doing something that they have passion around and love. And so when you think about that as sort of the opportunity for Twitch, like it's, in some respects, it's boundless. And so I look forward and think about having 7 million creators a month and 30 million daily visitors, and I just 10x that over the next decade.
Absolutely. I think, for me, I knew I wanted to play video games for people, but I didn't quite know where I wanted to be. So I started on YouTube, and I started with South Park Stick of Truth, which was really funny. But then I went on to Twitch, and I was like, you know what, I think this fits better for me. The live interaction and the community sense and like real time just really spoke to me, and I just went with it from there. So that was back in 2015 in January, so it was a while ago now. And started with no camera, then I did get a camera at 500 follows, and then things just went off from there. And, since then I've really seen Twitch take off in New Zealand as well. I only knew a handful of Twitch streamers in 2015, and now there's just so many. And that brings me to my next questions as well. Because we're a room full of game developers, how do you see game development being implemented more on Twitch? And do you see Twitch supporting game developers in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So games developers are some of our biggest partners. Basically, we've been working with games developers since Twitch started. I mean, actually in Justin TV days when Twitch really started being built out. And we think about a relationship with games developers almost as a life cycle. So it's everything from how can we help you with research, how can we help you with data around like what games are doing well, and then how do we help you as you're building a game, think about the launch of that game on Twitch, so kind of building awareness. And we have a whole bunch of services, whether it's beta keys and really building hype around the game coming and working with streamers to do that. A lot of the big games developers now use our Drops product to really build like really deep engagement and stickiness around launch. And so Valorant, Riot Games did this with Valorant, Fall Guys did it, Activision did it with Warzone, and we've seen about 450 drop campaigns that have touched 70,000 channels on Twitch now. So Drops is a really strong way to think about working with us. And then we also have a tool called Extensions, which is effectively like these interactive overlays that you can build really anything you want that will enable viewers to engage with the creator as they're playing the game. And so we've had some games developers, so Ubisoft used it with Hyperscape to actually enable viewers to control what was going on in the game. And then we have others who are doing it with sort of overlays to earn points, so battle pass points, or to get special access to special loot. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways that we are working with games dev in that way. One of the fun things that's been happening a lot recently is we've been having creator branded in-game benefits. And so if you think about Twitch, the community really connects to a creator. They don't connect to Twitch writ large. They're like, oh, you're my creator, I come to watch you. And so it's the creator endorsement that is a big part of what is exciting to them when a game launch drops. So it's like, is a creator I respect playing the game, what are they doing? And so we're beginning to do these in-game benefits that help viewers actually become a player. We did that with Among Us, with the Glitch Pet. We've been offering some custom creative branded drops. So there's some fun things like that to do as well. And I actually meant to get the URL for you, but if you search for Twitch games developers, you'll get the URL that comes up. That's all of the things that we can work with you on.
No, that's really wonderful. Do you have any analytics against which, say, bounties or extensions, or which has worked well or performed the best for game developers?
Yeah, so Drops is definitely the number one performing what I think of as like game engagement, game launch tool. But then a lot of the extensions, the thing we find with extensions is developers are actually trying to do something slightly custom. They don't want to just do something everybody else has done. Yeah. And so the extensions tend to be lower numbers because it's a specific developer. But there's lots of interesting learnings there. And we have a bunch of case studies that we can share with games devs.
Oh, that's great. And in terms of tags, so if a game developer isn't wanting to, they're not ready to launch, they're not ready to push and market a campaign, but they just want to stream themselves doing game development. What ways do you think Twitch can help in that regard to bring an audience into them and give them tools to help their streams?
Yeah, so we do this with actually a lot of our, what I think of as like enterprise partners versus individual creative broadcasters, where they're kind of launching products or have charity initiatives. There's a whole range of things. And it's really about, we have an onboarding package that basically says, here's how to start up your channel. Here's how to help pull your audience from your existing socials. So whether you've got a following on Twitter or Instagram, whether you have a community on Discord, here's a way to kind of put them to come across to watch you on Twitch. And then again, there's a bunch of case studies and learnings in there around, like, these are the things to do to really get your audience engaged and be enthusiastic around the game. Twitch viewers love seeing things early. Like, we've seen this in music, like a lot of artists now will actually do sort of studio production work and design that, start creating new albums and do that interactively, and so get people's feedback around like particular pieces of music or how they're producing a piece of music. I have to say, I don't think games developers have exploited this as much as they could. Like, there's a little bit of a like, oh no, we need to keep everything confidential. I think we're definitely getting to the point where people are realizing if you can be a little bit more open with the community earlier, you can bring them along and kind of get them really engaged and passionate around the game before you actually launch.
Right. Alrighty. So we're getting to the end of our segment now. So I would love to close off with saying, what advice or philosophies could you, as a woman, provide to other women in the industry, not just in game dev, but in games in general, who see you in your role and think, I want to get there one day?
Yeah, it's funny, I get asked this question a lot, like, what was my career plan? I had absolutely no career plan whatsoever. I literally would do a job and then something else would crop up and it would be like, that looks really interesting, that's growing, I like the way things are going in that particular space. I love all things media, and so anything that was sort of like, oh, this is like the bleeding edge of what's going to happen next in gaming or music or media. And then I would just go and do that. And in hindsight, when I look back, like, there was certainly, no path where I was like, oh, I will be the CEO of Twitch one day. It was much more about like doing something I really loved. And I think if you're going to face hurdles, particularly as a woman, there will be times when you will be lonely. The proportion of men to women in gaming in particular is still not terribly flash. And so make sure that you're doing something you really love, because that will see you through those periods.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. When are you coming back to New Zealand? We miss you.
Yes, that is the million-dollar question. I don't know how many of you who are in New Zealand are indeed tracking the MIQ situation. I'd like everyone at the Games Development Conference to lobby Jacinda to expand the MIQ pathway. I need to be very clear, I'm totally on board that you should keep the borders shut. You've done an excellent job keeping COVID out. But we need a bit more capacity in MIQ so the 600,000 New Zealanders like me who are stuck overseas can actually come home and visit our families.
That's a fair argument. All right, well, that's all I have. But thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. We're so proud that you're a Kiwi doing big things overseas and in the gaming industry. And thank you so much for your time. Can we wrap it up? We good? All right. Well, thank you. Give a round of applause.